Hey friends, thank you so much for watching. If you have ever experienced extreme anxiety or panic attacks, I have too. You are not alone. Coming up, 5 keys to overcoming anxiety and panic attacks, so stay tuned. Anxiety, panic attacks, that is what we are talking about today. By the way, if you like this video, hit the subscribe button. I'd love it if you would, and also leave your comments below. So in my 20s, I started having really bad panic attacks when I was in college, and I had no idea what was happening to me. I thought I was going totally mad. It felt like I was having out-of-body experiences. I was very disoriented, along with all the other stuff like the racing heart, sweaty palms, and all those sorts of things. And it was really scary. So it wasn't until years later that I found out that there's actually a name for this craziness. It's called depersonalization or derealization. I know that sounds odd, but if you've ever had this type of panic attack, derealization probably makes perfect sense to you. And it's more than just odd, it's actually really terrifying. So my mom took me to the doctor. They said, yeah, you're having panic attacks. They gave me some Xanax, sent me on my way, and I was back in college, back in the dorms in the fall. But here's the thing, the anxiety didn't go away. The panic attacks didn't stop. So I started treating my panic attacks with alcohol, and I did that throughout most of my 20s. Here's what's interesting. I was so cut off from myself emotionally that it wasn't until years later that I began to understand the connection between the drinking and the anxiety. I'm happy to say that I no longer have panic attacks, and I've been sober for 15 years, although I do struggle with anxiety still. So what I want to talk to you about today is these are 5 things that I have done over the years to overcome anxiety and panic attacks. Now, these aren't the things that you normally read about, like deep breathing, exercises, and cutting back on caffeine and exercise. Don't get me wrong, those things are all super important, and I do those things too. But these are a little more lifelong things to improve your inner being, like your spiritual and your mental health, okay? The first one is distract yourself, okay? Let me give you an example. And the other ones are more internally focused. What I want to say is that it's super important to get to the root of what's going on with your anxiety and the issues you might be dealing with. But sometimes in that really freaky, scary moment, you just need to distract yourself so you can stop the insanity. So here's an example. When I was in my 20s, when I was in college, I had a really bad panic attack, and it lasted for like 2 hours, and I thought I was having a heart attack. So I went running to the phone, the payphone. It was a long time ago. It was in the dorms. They had payphones, and I pick up the phone, and I'm about to call 911, and then I stopped, and I'm like, I'm only 21. I'm too young to be having a heart attack. Plus, I didn't want the cops to show up at the dorm. I mean, that would be embarrassing. I mean, I was a freshman, all those sorts of things. So I ended up just walking around campus for about an hour. And then when I got back to my room, I tried to read, and that didn't work. So I picked up my guitar, and I was like, well, maybe if I can just pick out a melody or sort of get distracted into this melody here, it'll distract me and bring me back to myself. And you know what? It worked. And so now whenever I get that sort of derealization or that freaked out feeling, I do something to distract myself, and it really helps a lot. So here's another one, letting go of the need for approval. For the longest time, I allowed what other people thought of me to determine who I was as a person. You could say that I was not a very well-integrated person. Well-integrated means that basically your public life and your private life match. Your public and private behavior are the same. They call that integration. Well, the thing with me was that I had absolutely no internal sense of self. So I was defined, they say, from the outside in rather than from the inside out. Does that make sense? And so what happens when you live like that is you're allowing things you can't control, right? Other people, circumstances outside yourself, to determine your reality. And in my case, I didn't even, everything people would say to me, I would question my own beliefs based on what they would say because I had no internal sense of self. So this caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of what they call free-floating anxiety, which is basically like generalized anxiety disorder, where you can't really pin it on anything. It just comes and goes. And for me, it came and went a lot. Remember that we can't control anything outside of ourselves. So what happens when we're guided by those things, we're going to experience a lot of anxiety. So once I began to understand this, and I began to surrender that part of myself to God and ask Him to do for me what I could not do for myself, He began to heal me and began to heal my self-esteem, which brings me to number 3, which is practice the Serenity Prayer. Now, the short version of the Serenity Prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept what I can't change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And by the way, if you want a step-by-step video on how to live out the Serenity Prayer, be sure and watch my next video. But let me give you just like a weird illustration. Okay, I used to have these crazy dreams where I would be just running in the forest. I was in the middle of the forest, it was dark, and it didn't matter how far I ran, how fast I ran, I could never get to the edge of the forest. It was really kind of scary. And then I'd have other dreams where I just couldn't get something done. It was a simple task like maybe trying to leave the house, or in radio they call them dead air dreams, where you're always trying to get a record on and you can't. But they're basically anxiety dreams, okay? So it was during one of these times that I was having some challenges at work, and I just didn't feel like I had any power over the situation. And I started to reflect on these dreams, and I was like, wow, these dreams are a real indication of my emotional state. My anxiety was coming from those feelings of powerlessness. So I began to pray the Serenity Prayer and say, Lord, help me determine what I can change, and please give me the courage to do that. So I made a list of all my grievances at work, and I made an appointment with my supervisor, and it must have looked really funny because I had a little notebook and I wrote everything down, and I was totally scared and I was shaking and I was reading off my list, right? And sadly, they didn't grant me any of my requests, but you know what? I felt so much better. And you know what else? I stopped having those dreams. And so I realized what I needed to do. I needed to stop obsessing over those anxiety-inducing things that I had no control over, and pray for the courage to act on the things that I did have control over. And I tell you what, it made all the difference in the world. So here's another one: alter your thinking. And I'll be honest, this is a tough one for me because I'm kind of a pessimist. So the glass isn't actually half empty, it's just empty, right? There's just nothing in it. So in order for me to alter my thinking, it takes quite a bit of work. One of the things I started doing probably 10 years ago is just practicing gratitude. Always trying to be grateful for the big and little blessings in my life. And that has helped me tremendously. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 tells us to give thanks in everything, in all circumstances, for this is the will of the Lord. Another thing that I do that has really helped me to change my thinking is to simply stop the negativity train. So have you ever just woken up in the morning and you, stub your toe really hard, you trip over something, you spill coffee all over the front of you, and you're just screaming, you're like, it's going to be one of those days, right? So that's when I have to stop. And I'm like, okay, I'm stopping the train right here. And I say to myself, you know what? It's not going to be one of those days, right? It started off rough, but from here on out, it's going to be a really good day going forward. And 9 times out of 10, it's a really good day. So that's just kind of an example of some of the ways to alter your thinking. It's easier said than done, but it's like anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And I have found that doing that has really helped me to reduce my anxiety over the years. Here's the last one. Don't isolate. Reach out to people, especially when you don't want to. Now, if you're an introvert like me, this can be hard to do. After my brother died, he died of his addiction in 2015, and it was super sad, super tragic. And of course, a lot of times I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go out with my friends, but I forced myself to. And I have to be honest and tell you that during that time, I can honestly say that my friends literally saved my life. Isolation causes a lot of problems. We know that with this whole COVID thing, suicides going up, all those sorts of things. And one of the things isolation causes is anxiety, depression, right? Anxiety is at the top of that list. Proverbs 18:1 tells us, one who has isolated himself seeks his own desires. He rejects all sound judgment. What that basically means is when we don't spend time with people who can sow into us and love us, we can end up doing really stupid things or make poor decisions. I know I have. Also, Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 reminds us that two are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed, right? If one person falls, the other one will reach out and help them up. It says, but someone who falls alone is in real trouble. So just for me personally to know that I had people who loved me and cared about me that I could reach out to really helped with my anxiety in a big way. So what about you? Do you still have anxiety? Do you have panic attacks? Have you overcome them? Do you have some words of wisdom? Love to hear from you. Make your comments below. I would appreciate it. And also hit the subscribe button if you like this video. And I want to leave you with one of my favorite scriptures when it comes to anxiety. It brings me a lot of comfort. Psalm 46:2-7. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fail. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The Lord is with you no matter what. The God of Jacob is our fortress. God bless you and thanks for watching.